You've made a commitment to training, but how to track employee training progress? That's a great question. By the end of this video, you're going to have 4 clear steps of how to get your team to buy in, not only to the training, but also to the all-important accountability. You feel yourself telling your team the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and they just continue to look at you with blank stares? You want a culture of accountability in your business where the things you talk about actually get done and followed up with? Listen, you're asking the right questions if you're here on this video, and the thing I want to remind you is that anything without implementation is just hallucination all over the place. That great Thomas Edison quote that we've got to remember. So you're here because you want to implement and you want tactics and strategies on how to do that. The truth is, what gets trained gets done repetitively, and what gets measured gets trained. And so we need to be in a position where we're measuring these sorts of things and we're training these things so that we can hold people accountable to get these things done, so that you can be liberated from chaos to make time for the things that matter most. One of the first things we've got to do is you've got to be abundantly clear on your training outline and the expectations of that outline. Too many times, a lot of business owners will go into a meeting and they might hire an outside person, bring them in and go, hey, we're going to build this amazing training outline. And when you start to build it, you actually realize that, hey, we're not going to do anything with this. Like, you feel it, you don't want to say it in the moment, but you just feel it in the moment. We're not going to do anything with this. What I will tell you is this: if you have an outline in place, you're halfway there. What we've got to get is the other side of this to make sure that there's an implementation part of it, but we can't implement something that's not written down. Michael Gerber used to say all the time, if it's not written down, you don't own it. We're a little bit harsher than he is. If it's not written down, it does not exist. And so if you don't have a training outline, there is no training to outline or to train. And so we've got to make sure that that's trained in there. Honestly, the easiest way to set a training outline is just write it down on a document, write it down on a spreadsheet, have something that you can refer back to. Now with that, that's what leads into our second tool. You track employee training progress by setting the expectation that the employee will be in a constant state of training. So how do you set that expectation up front? It actually starts at the pre-hire, the hire, and the onboarding stage. If you bring in a new employee and you have not set the expectation that repetitive, predictable, meaningful training is a part of what we do, then as they get on in the business 6 months and 12 months and 18 months, they're going to be less likely to see the seriousness of that training. Keep this in mind. A lot of times long-term employees are harder to get buy-in from than the new employees. We found that out over time. And what we see is that the new employees think that this is sort of non-optional, what they're being trained on, whereas the long-term employees think, well, we've done it this way for years, so we'll just kind of keep doing it the way that we want to do it. So if you set the expectation up front with new employees, well, Scott, what do we do if we have a lot of older employees that are not really buying in? Well, you start holding them accountable to this new training as well and set that expectation often. Hey, I know I didn't do this early on. Take culpability. Take ownership of it. I didn't do this on, but I'm doing it now. And we want to have this going forward. So you've got to set the expectation. For your new employees, a couple of tools to help you set that expectation. One is that onboarding checklist. So you've got a 4-week onboarding script and you walk them through it. Also, during your pre-hire setting, where you're doing due diligence in your pre-hire, you're reaching out to references, you're doing your DISC personality, you're having them do some homework. When you tell them, hey, we followed up with your references, what do you think you're communicating to them? So we're following our process. We're doing what we said we're going to do, and our expectation is you will do the same once you come into this business as well. So your pre-hire onboarding, your onboarding script, how you're training people when they're coming into the business, all of that sets the groundwork so that when they're here 6 months and 6 years and 16 years, they're buying into the training and understanding that implementation is required. It's a non-negotiable. So the first part of this is both outline, that's awareness, and then the mindset that this is the expectation. So what about the nuts and bolts of actually tracking training? Well, I want you to go buy a super expensive piece of software. You ready? Let's go ahead and get ready to write this down. It's called a spreadsheet. All right, so I'm teasing a little bit. Just go get a spreadsheet, open a spreadsheet in Google or Microsoft or whatever. And that's going to be our initial methodology for how we begin to track this training that we're going to implement. So the good news is when I get you to do a spreadsheet, if you'll do this, then you can actually spreadsheet about me. Sorry, it's a dad joke. I promised my kids I would drop that in there. And so I did. I'm not against software. I really do, though, want you to forgo the expensive software for now. I don't want you to jump to the PM software, to the off-the-shelf SaaS stuff. I just want you to start with a spreadsheet, because there, what it's going to develop in you is it's going to develop a habit of implementation without having to go learn a new software language. So it gets rid of that idea, and we can just focus on accountability, because the outline is usually, it's hard to get to, but a lot of times we can develop that with a little grit, but it's the implementation over time, repetition, predictability, and meaning that we struggle with. And if we've got to fight an uphill battle of learning a new software language, then we usually won't get the implementation done in the first place. So in that spreadsheet, I'm going to give you a lot of flexibility of what to do. Basically, you need the things that you're going to track, the items, the frequency via which you'll track those, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever you want to do, and then some measure of accountability within that, the person who's going to actually be doing it. And so with that, if you'll just do a simple process of what's the thing to track, what's the date and frequency to track it, and then who's responsible for it, you will begin to build in accountability. And if you have that, you can put that as a line item on your weekly team meeting. Every business ought to have a once weekly, agenda-driven, leader-led team meeting. It acts as a port to the body, like in a hospital. If they want to push vitamins or fluids or drugs or whatever else, instead of 5 different methods of getting that in, they just have one. They push it there. That's your team meeting. And so if leadership accountability and training accountability is a line item in your spreadsheet, then you can track that every single week at your team meeting. As you're tracking your progress of training, you're going to want to intentionally build culture around this. Don't miss this. This is a huge opportunity to be able to do that. So how can you build culture within this idea of tracking? Because there's accountability. A lot of people are afraid of accountability. Well, there's one organization that we follow, and they do a really good job, especially because they're a church, believe it or not. And so you would think a lot of churches are just sort of laissez-faire when it comes to accountability. They trust that sort of the Spirit will provide for them, right? Not this organization. Of course, they trust that the Spirit's going to provide for them, and they're going to do great feedback. And so they give candid feedback to team members after every major activity. So somebody gives a teaching, they give feedback right away. Somebody does some sort of leadership thing, they give feedback right away. And they will ask, hey, are you open to my feedback right now? It's a great question to ask. And with the feedback, what you want to offer is both something positive that they did well and something of critique worthy that they need to work on. And we don't need to be afraid of that as an organization. So recently in our business, we have a team of 12. We started a marketing and sales meeting that was different from our coaches meeting and our team meeting, even though our coaches have business development responsibility. We split that out. We wanted to go by system. Well, within the marketing and sales meeting, what we realized is we had a section of accountability where each coach was responsible for going for a list of ideas to talk about where they're reaching out to new leads, following up with existing clients, those sorts of things. But what we were finding is they would just motor through the accountability and then we just moved on. So we started something a little different, and it's a feedback loop. After every time a coach gives their accountability update, because I lead that meeting, I'll say, hey, I need one person to give them feedback on something they're crushing right now. They're doing really, really good. It's a green. Okay, we'll get that feedback, and then I'll say I need one person to give feedback to this coach on something that you feel like they could do better, and give them some insight on that. Now, it's always a little tougher to get somebody to speak up on that, but what we're doing is we're intentionally breeding feedback. I'm not giving them the option. Somebody has to give something helpful and positive, somebody has to give something helpful and critique worthy. And so we're not allowing them to skirt that. Hey, does anybody have anything that they need to work on? No? Okay, let's move on. You just missed an opportunity. So if you can bring into your team meeting the moment somebody gives an update on their progress and accountability, hey, can somebody around the table tell them what they're doing really good at? And can somebody around the table tell them something they want them to work on with that? You create that culture. It's a safe spot to be able to give that feedback. Remember I said earlier that the best time to get started in setting the expectations for what you expect long-term for team members is when you have a new hire. Well, I've got a great video. I want you to click on this and make time to watch it and work on the action items of how to build a training program for a new employee. So go click on that now. My name's Scott Beebe. We work with business owners, 3 to 100 employees to build out their purpose, people, process, and profit so that you can be liberated from chaos to make time for what matters most.